Good morning, everybody. It's great to see you. And let's see if we can make sense together of today's scriptures and take something with us to our lives as well. As I was reading when I was reading the Paul's expression at the beginning when he says, I do not understand my own actions, for I do not know what I want, but I do everything that I hate. Now, if I do what I want, I agree that the law is good, and so on and so on. But the first one is I do not understand my own actions, and I do not do what I want to do. The first thing that crossed my mind was, well, I think Paul needs some therapy. If he has no understanding, if he is so lost, if somebody told you that today, that's probably the directions we would go. Like, yeah, you probably need to understand a little bit more about yourself, about your life, about why you're doing the things you don't want to do. And in that sense, I think each one of us can really connect to Paul this morning. That I think we all know, I know, you know what is right, what is wrong. When Jesus later says that, it will be hidden from intelligent people and it will be revealed to infants, he's talking about children very often because children simply know what's right, it's wrong. They know when to say yes and when to say no. It's clear. And we often find ourselves in places when we get more complex lives and there are more things to consider, and we sometimes get lost in what is right and what is wrong. And sometimes even if we know, we are pressured to act a certain way because of everything around us. So what Paul is talking about this morning is really perfectly demonstrating and talking about the law. When I was trained to in the seminary to write sermons, I was always reminded it always has to be the law and the gospel. You can't just give the gospel and cheap grace. There always has to be law, but there is a reason for that. And these two texts that come together for us to from Paul and from St. Matthew couldn't be a more perfect demonstration of what that means. So Paul is talking about the law. When he starts talking, is what law kind of burdens him. We need law, right? Everywhere. We need the law. We need to know what's right, what's wrong, what we can do, what we can't do. Otherwise, we don't know when we cross the boundaries. At the same time, sometimes we are bound by it. And so Paul starts talking about law and how it shows in our lives. He's talking about that he loves the law of God, and then he wants to do everything according to it. But also he really brings his soul to us. How many of us can publicly say, maybe to ourselves even, or even to others, that I don't know what I'm doing. I don't understand myself. Paul admits it to the whole congregation. He writes a letter, and then it gets canonized, and now it's in the Bible, and now we all read it every time, knowing what he didn't know. It's a vulnerable place, but he's bringing it to us. And he's talking about the law that he is not able to fulfill. And he's in that way giving us freedom to admit to it. These are strong words, but if I admit that I also don't know what I'm doing, that I also hate things and certain aspects of life, and yet I then comply with what is expected on the outside from society, and then I go back to myself and I'm not happy with that. And all that is building also integrity of the human being, because if we get lost in what's right and wrong and we just justify every action we do out there, I think eventually we'll get lost. Our body, our mind, and then our soul get really tarnished by that. But if we, even when we do wrong, and we can come back and say, I hate what I'm doing, it's not right, that I call that integrity in a human being, still knowing where I belong and what is right and what is wrong. The one thing that the law brings very often is shame and guilt. It's when the difference between shame and guilt is that guilt is that I know I've done something wrong, but I'm still lovable and I'm a decent human being. However, very often we get overwhelmed so much that we get into a place of shame. And shame is different. Shame is more difficult to heal, because shame says, I've done something wrong and I'm a bad person and I'm not worth anything. And it's so easy, that there's a very thin line between a healthy guilt and a destructive shame. And definitely Jesus doesn't want us in that place. That's not why he came. He didn't come so we get lost in feeling so guilty and that we go into a place of shame. Jesus came to deliver us from that guilt, from anything wrong that we do. But he doesn't want us in a place where we feel we don't deserve love from God, love from people. If any of you know Brené Brown, I want to recommend highly her books, or she has even a TED Talk on Netflix, and anywhere on YouTube you can find it. And she's talking really about the depth of shame. And so I want to just a side note for you later on to Google her, Brené Brown. And she wrote a book that is called I Thought It Was Just Me, and then in parentheses, but it isn't. And she's talking about guilt there. And that's what I see Paul doing. That's what I see many of us doing. We do something wrong, we come up short, and we came into that place where we think it's only me. Probably nobody out there, is going through this. It's only me. And when you get into that place of shame, you feel really lost. We feel really lost when we think it's only me. Nobody else has this sin. Nobody else struggles with this. Nobody else is afraid if they're going to lose their job. Nobody else is afraid if they can pay their payments next month. Nobody else is ashamed and worried if their children are going to succeed, or if they're going to meet the standards of society. We have all these worries, and in this time of history, even more so. How many people lost their job? How many people are worried about what's going to be next, and how long is this going to last, and what this isolation is doing to us? And what Brené Brown is talking about is that the moment you say it and you realize there are other people who feel similarly, that moment takes the power of shame away, because in that moment, I'm not alone. See what guilt and shame is doing to us, and what you can see in Paul's doing that. It makes you feel like you're on your own, like you in this by yourself, and everybody else is fine. It's just me. But it isn't. And when I read this, I think of Martin Luther when he's talking about, I don't know if you know his expression of sin boldly. And that's my favorite line to go to in my Lutheranism: sin boldly. What is it? Is it a disregard for God, disregard for law? No, it's not. For me, when Martin Luther says that, he's saying, embrace your humanity. You are going to fall short. You are going to fail. You are going to come short of fulfilling all the God's law. And that's the point. Because that's the moment when you realize you need Jesus. That's the moment you realize you need God's grace. So with Martin Luther saying that, embrace your humanity, embrace who you are. This is how you're created, with all the ugly feelings, with all the body that you have, but also with all the love and forgiveness. The other thing that we have in Lutheranism is that concept of simul justus et peccator. And that means that we are simultaneously sinners and saints. And that's another big part to accepting us, that yes, I am accepted. I am washed by blood of Jesus. I am accepted, and God sees me as holy, as saint. But I continue to be a sinner. I continue to be imperfect human being. And if you can bring both of these together to anybody that you're talking to, not somebody who is self-righteous with the name of Christian, that is only a saint and only capable of judging everything else, but also bring this part of me that is sinner, that I have to sin boldly and I have to embrace my humanity. Both of these, my saintness and my brokenness needs to connect, because that brings humility. And that brings this healthy place where I can see I failed and I am guilty, but I am worthy of love. I am worthy of what Jesus has done for me. And that's the message of the gospel. That's the message that is there for us in the gospel today. When Jesus says, "Come to me, all that you are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your soul. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Before that, you could see lots of judgment as well, as it continues from Paul judging himself, then Jesus saying, if I'm drinking, I'm drunk, if I'm this, I'm that, it's like I can't do right. And then he just says, when you're in that place, when you feel like you can't do right, when you feel lost, when you feel overwhelmed by everything that that life is throwing at you, all the worry about your job, all the worry about your children, all the worry about your future, about your health, just come to me. There is a place where you can come, where you can rest. And what he says is, come to me, take my yoke, and learn from me. There's three things for us today. Come to me from everything else out there. Come to me. And then he says something that, give up your burden and take another one. Take my yoke. It's like, what? It's like, I just gave one, and now you want me to take another one. What is the trade-off? What is the logic here? And the thing is that that is part of good news, because the yoke was used to put together two animals together to share the burdens, to make it easier. And the good yoke was there to put on the animals, so if the burden was really heavy, it was still manageable. I hear often when people say that God promised that he will not give us more than we can carry. Just for the record, there is nothing like that said in the Bible. Okay, it's not in the Bible. There is in the Bible, we will not be tempted beyond our ability. And there is something in the Bible about burden, and there are some folks that connected it. It's not true. We will be given more than we can handle. I think many people have been given more than they can handle in their health, in their losses. We are going as human beings individually together through terrible times, through hard times. And sometimes it is more. How many people end up needing behavioral and mental health because it was more than they could handle? So I don't want to pretend that it's not going to happen and life is just going to be easy. But Jesus promises something, that he will be there carrying it with us. That if we come to him, he will let us know we will not be alone. That we will not be left alone, and that he will help us to carry it. And then he says, when you do that, when you come with me and when we're carrying it together, he says, come and learn from me. And I think that's the place that can make this yoke, this burden, easier. When we learn and look at Jesus, what he does, how he deals with things. When we learn from Jesus what's important. To have a yoke is to put the animal into obedience and submission. And that's kind of what we're called to. I don't know about you, but that never sits well with me, obedience and submission. And yet, this is something that God invites us to do. In our lives, we need to be obedient, and we're going to submit to something, even we like it or not. If it's going to be expectations of the society, if it's going to be unhealthy relationship, if it's going to be a job. So how free it is if we can choose to do that submission, to do that to our God. When we can submit to someone who loves us and cares for the best of us. If we submit to expectations of beauty in society, we're going to buy so many cosmetical products, and we're going to just be submitted to someone else who is benefiting on our insecurity and selling us another better cream for our face. If I submit to God, I can be sure that my submission is to someone who doesn't want to take advantage of me, but someone who rather wants to build me up, doesn't want me in place of shame, someone who wants me to know that I'm loved, that I'm cherished, and that when I'm overwhelmed with all the law and world, I can come and I can rest. And when I submit to my Lord, then I know that I'm submitting to someone who will there be with me when the worst of the burden may be there for me. So come to me, all that you are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Amen.